Waiters and waitresses think they're underpaid, and there's legislative action that may just support them this week. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York. Good Monday evening to you. Yes, we'll have two representatives from that industry here who will advocate that the $2.89 minimum wage, per hour pay for restaurant employees, namely the waiters and waitresses, bartenders and the like, is just too little. And you're saying, well, wait a second, they get tipped. Well, they'll explain their perspective. I'm keeping an open mind on this. Doesn't seem like it does a lot of damage to us as taxpayers or as consumers, I don't think. So we'll get into that. Hope you had a great Father's Day weekend. Let us get into the rundown because there's so much to cover today. And I'm looking forward to that conversation with our guest this evening. Yeah, you know what? President of the United States pulled a cutie this particular past weekend. Here is the headline that tells us about it. Yeah, the N-word. You want to talk about third rail, at least for white America. Of course, the standards are very hard to follow, right? Because in black America, with young people, the word is used all the time. But in white America, not to create divides, but definitions, it's not usable. Listen to what happened over the weekend, then I got some thoughts.
President Obama says the legacy of slavery and discrimination still casts a long shadow. During a podcast interview in California, the president said the country is not cured of racism, and he used a heavily loaded word to make his point.
It's not just a matter of it not being polite to say public. That's not the measure of whether racism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination.
The president spoke just days after a white man opened fire at a Bible study at the Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina. The White House says the president was making the point there is more work to be done to wipe out symbols of racism. South Carolina is taking up that debate as it relates to the Confederate flag. Many lawmakers say such a potent reminder of slavery should no longer fly over the state capitol.
Interesting, the governor of South Carolina, just before our taping of the broadcast, we tape late afternoons, indicated that she would like to see the flag come down, which from an outsider's perspective seems to be a very good thing. Here's the thing though, the president used the word instructively, but he could have said, and by the way, I'm using the word instructively, and anybody should be able to use the word instructively, anybody. That would prevent the neuroses that people like I have in using the word, even instructively, because if I use the word here, I'll be in a meeting down the hallway in 10 minutes. It's either executive or racial privilege that the president was exercising, which I'm not sure leads to any kind of coming together. Study forever, huh? Well, that's kind of the concept that Governor Raimondo seems to be bothered by. A proposal that is but 3 weeks old, right? Here are the headlines. Toll debate, maybe a fall session, maybe not, because she is really itching to get these tolls on the highways. We've done numerous programs on this. We've had the Truckers Association. We've had plenty of conversation about it. Right now, we have a new proposal, like $500 to $600 million of principal, and that much money in interest on that principal to the tune of about $1.1 billion. This is the biggest financial move we've made in a long time, and she wants it done by Thursday. She talked to Steve Klampkin of our radio newsroom.
There was some initial concerns around the burden that it would put on local trucking companies. We took those concerns into account. We've reworked the bill, and now it's time for action. You can study problems forever. We need action. It's a good bill. Let's take action. Let's fix the roads and get people to work.
Well, it's all of a sudden, she wants this done by the end of the week, which would be a tragedy. Look, if Plan A doesn't work and all the trucks don't roll up to the tolls, the gantries, 17 of them they're going to put around the state at a cost of $43 million, guess what? If they're not cracking the nut on this borrowing, you know who's going to be paying through the gantries. Yes, you and me, paying tolls on the roads that we've already paid taxes for and now use without any toll pressure. You want to talk about killing an economy. This thing needs much more thought. Something else is going on here. I'm trying to figure out whether this is a jobs bill, a bridge bill, or a coercion bill. More tomorrow. All right, how to dissolve? I don't know. At WPRI.com, this headline, big meeting tonight since the dissolve vote was made last week. Here's some background from Eyewitness News.
Coventry Fire District, located in the Anthony section of town, is getting some help alleviating its nearly $1 million debt. This after the district's board chair announces that local fire union 3372 has agreed to help cut down nearly a third of the district's debt by offering $350,000 worth of concessions contingent upon a resident-approved tax hike.
I am thrilled.
Fire District Board Chair Frank Palin says the concessions equal nearly $22,000 from each of the district's 16 firefighters.
I'm very, very happy that the firefighters came through for us. It was a great sacrifice for them.
All right, and that happened a couple of weeks ago. But since the voters have said, hey, thanks firefighters, but we want to dissolve this anyway. So the people who pay the taxes in the Coventry Fire District have said, you know what, we're done with this fire department. So tonight they're going to have to figure out what that means. The voters can't dissolve. Only the General Assembly can dissolve, do away with, throw into bankruptcy, gosh knows what else, that particular fire district. Take notes, if you live in one, they're doomed sooner or later. Getting close? I hope so. CNN.com, now they got DNA. They're closing in upstate New York.
Police set up roadblocks near Owl's Head, New York, about 25 miles from the Clinton Correctional Facility, searching cars for escaped killers David Sweat and Richard Matt. Law enforcement sources told CBS News DNA from both escapees was found in a vacant cabin that had been broken into near Wolf Pond in the Saranac Lake region of New York within the past 24 hours. The DNA break comes after hundreds of officers swarmed a rural area in western New York near the Pennsylvania border over the weekend.
Okay, here's the thing. I got relatives in northern Vermont, I'm not telling you where, who are walking around at night with baseball bats in the house and gosh knows what other weapons, worrying about these guys crawling up on them. Based on the map, we're doing pretty well, but here's hoping the DNA brings them home or back where they belong. And finally, in our rundown tonight, I caught this. I thought this was kind of interesting. Yeah. So a couple of Rhode Islanders, one of whom plays in that dueling pianos thing, which is a great show, by the way, down at Davell Square. They decided that they're going to auction off the football. Yeah, they say it is the football, the one detectable football that you can absolutely document that had the air kind of let out of it, all with the Tom Brady scandal. Scandal, I guess, or controversy. Kev, would you say it's a scandal or a controversy? What is it, my Patriots fan? Controversy. His bias just bleeding through. Sorry. It's a scandal. It's a scandal. But anyway, they want $25,000 to start the bidding at a site called Lelands, LELENDS.com. There's so many of these now. So now it's their own charity. They'd like to start a family. So if you'd like to buy the ball from them, Kev, the bidding starts momentarily. All right. So your state of mind is important to us. Give us a ring at 228-1886. You can email us, Facebook post, or tweet. Your pleasure. But I'm going to skedaddle right to our next segment because I want to see what the arguments are to raise the minimum wage for a specific group of workers. Stay with us. So we have chronic conversations about the minimum wage in general, but we don't have many conversations about a specific sector of our business community. And here's an op-ed that caught my eye. Now listen, we've been talking about this for a while, but this op-ed actually really caught my eye. I thought, there's some interesting arguments here, and the author of this op-ed is here. Moira, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. And Mike runs a brand new organization.
Well, the organization's 15 years old, but in Rhode Island we've been here for 5 months.
And so the Restaurant Opportunity Center would be what?
It's a worker advocacy organization that was founded September 12th, 2001 by the displaced workers that worked at the Windows on the World at the World Trade Center.
So that's got an interesting legacy.
Yeah, it is. Well, following the collapse of the towers, 15,000 workers found themselves without a job, and so they needed a way to support each other. And so one of the things they did was they formed a mutual aid society to work for restaurant worker rights. And then they found, as they met people from around the country, that there was a lot of insecurity and injustice in the industry itself in regards to workers.
Well, your background before that is
In trade unions.
okay,
yes.
but I think I've heard Mike talk in one of the governor's think tanks and took some notes on some of his thoughts. Very, very insightful, and just in terms of the entire political, business, interactive thing. So obviously you've got a lot to offer there. But Moira, I got to tell you, I want to hear about your qualm. But there's one thing in here that's driving me crazy. You write, amongst other things, well, you have a long list of things that you got to do as a bartender that you don't think you get paid for. But let me jump to something so I don't forget. You write, you're forced to pay tabs that were walked out on. No, you're not. Not by law, right?
Personally, I have never tended bar. This article was a snippet of a larger group collaboration that appeared first in RI Future online, and it was 101 things that I've done for $2.89 an hour. So there was a mishmash.
Meaning a compilation of everybody's what they do type of thing?
Right. It was much longer.
Right, and regardless of whether or not it's legal to require your workers to pay for tabs that were walked out on, owners make you do it anyway. A lot of times they turn it into something that was your fault. Well, if you had been back to check on the check when you dropped it, if you had made sure that they hadn't paid you before they left, you're the only thing between them and the door, and if you didn't do it, that's your job. Now, I recognize there are laws in place to protect people like us, but there is one person at the
DLT, yes.
DLT who's in charge of all the hours violations for Rhode Island. So getting help is a much bigger
well,
issue.
this is well, I don't want to get too distracted because we want to talk about the nature of the compensation thing. But let me just say this: this is the second time this concept's been in print. There was also a story in the newspaper about a week or so ago where a waitress was quoted, and the restaurant was named, and she said the same thing. You know, I got to do that, I got to do that. And so on the radio show, I said, "What?" And the phones exploded, and then the restaurant association head called and said, "Wait a second, doesn't happen in my place, and it shouldn't happen in anybody else's."
Right. Well, that's the Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor did a study in 2011 to 2012 of 9,000 restaurants involving more than 22,000 workers altogether, and they found an 86% non-compliant rate with compensation or wage and hour violations.
Not just this item, but
not just this item, but in total, and also including things like if somebody walks out on a check, the server is held responsible. They are the last line, and so that's one of the ways that a owner can violate that law. Rhode Island, the Restaurant Association is right when they put their spokespeople up and says we have not committed these crimes. They haven't, most likely. But in the past 3 months in Rhode Island, we've seen 3 separate wage violations and hours violations in restaurants prosecuted by the DLT.
Like
the Morocco group, which runs Dolce Vita, and the hood.
Is this all? It's before I get myself in hot water. Is
You're
this
not.
all? This has been public.
This is all public. This is all.
Rather than I was
okay.
thinking kinds of rather than
Yeah,
naming
kind of.
because I got to do the homework on
sure.
that.
But 3 separate, 2 restaurants downtown, more than 7 restaurants on Federal Hill altogether, plus other venues where tipped workers are. And this is just in the past 3 months.
Okay, well, let me just I just want to clarify this. I am sure that Mike is acting in good faith here. I haven't done any homework on that particular story, so I take no ownership of that particular remark, nor does the show, the TV station. But I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you, and I understand where you're coming from. All right, big picture. Talk to me about the big. You are a waitress?
Yes.
Okay, just not that compilation of waitress.
Right, I'm not all of those waitresses.
Okay. You're making $2.89 an hour.
Right.
You have to make minimum wage anyway, though, right? Based on if your tips don't make it in a pay period, right? Yes.
Theoretically, yeah. First and foremost, that requires you to tell your boss that you are not good enough at your job to be getting the bare minimum. And the response to that is invariably, then we'll find somebody who is. The restaurant industry is a very unforgiving place. and the $2.89 an hour originally, when it was established, was I think it was $2.13 actually, was 2/3 of minimum wage at the time, and yet minimum wage has steadily increased as time has gone on, and the sub-minimum wage has stayed the same. And a lot of times the argument that I get is, well, food costs have gone up, and so it makes it harder for employers to meet that. But food prices have gone up for me as well, for feeding my family. And I get paid less than a gallon of milk costs in an hour. I can't buy a gallon of milk with an hour's worth of work. And
no, but in that hour, listen, I'm not debating you. I'm just playing some devil's advocate. I'm open-minded about this. I'm more interested than fixed on a position. But in that hour, you're making tips.
tips are not legally required.
No, they're culturally built in.
Well, that's true and untrue at the same time. Is that the Rhode Island DLT and the Federal Department of Labor found that tipping behavior in Rhode Island is just above 50%.
What?
Yep. And the average tip is just above 15%. So actually, when you look at the actual number, tips are not being delivered.
1 out of every 2 customers.
Yes.
Are you walking away from 1 out of every 2 tables with no tip?
Yeah.
I'm sure it has
Yes.
a lot to do with the kind of restaurants versus
Well,
the kind of restaurant.
that's actually a really good
right,
point.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So, but that's a mean average type of piece of
Right,
data
exactly.
in
so
the industry.
you end up with, of the 22,000+ tipped workers in Rhode Island, 70% of them are women, and of that is the lowest paid. And then the top tier, the top 30%, are men who work at restaurants who either do not employ women as a whole, or historically have never employed women, such as, I won't bother to name those, but I mean, those restaurants do tend to be segregated, and because of that, you see a vast wage disparity. Whereas the average male in the industry makes more than $25,000 to $35,000 a year as an average, which means some are doing significantly better. But then with women in the industry, you find them making $14,300 a year, which is such a vast difference that there's a structural problem there.
All right, look, we got to pause here. We'll come back. I can't believe how cheap you are. Tip her. Don't worry about it. Okay, well, welcome back in. I cannot believe that half your customers, on average, walk away from. I can't even comprehend that behavior.
I personally work across the street from 3 high schools and a homeless shelter, so I feel like maybe I am part of the curve that's throwing it off for everybody else. But high schoolers are not notorious for tipping.
You made a good point during the break to me. Talking about cultures, foreign cultures, different. I said, well, that's over there. And you say,
They come here.
they come here.
They come here. I mean, it's a good industry, and there's no two ways about it. The restaurant industry is a backbone of Rhode Island, and we're a tourist state, and we should work towards building that up. Most other industrialized countries do not practice tipping, and so when they come here, they carry that practice with them. It's not unusual for large groups of families of tourists or families whose kids go to school or whatever, come here, they just don't tip. So Rhode Island has lower tipping rates than other states.
All right, so what do we do? Now that I'm becoming more empathetic based on that piece of data alone, what do we do? Because if I'm a restaurateur and I say, okay, I'm going to take more from $2.89 an hour to, well, here's the graphic, here's the proposed bill. Do you support this bill?
Of course.
Okay, this is $4.50 an hour next year, $6, $7.50, and $9. A slow growth toward match minimum wage. What happens to tipping culture when the public learns that you're making more money per hour base salary? Are you worried about the culture reaction to that?
You know,
it won't bother me.
America has a wonderful, and the population of the country is generous in general. And we reward,
except for the half that don't tip.
Except for the half that don't tip, but they do reward people who do well. In the 7 states that have eliminated sub-minimum wage, not only have they seen growth, double-digit growth in the restaurant industry, the people who work in the industry itself have seen deductions or decrease in poverty rates and an increase in personal income. So places like San Jose Valley, which have a significantly greater depressed income than Rhode Island, have seen people who work as servers not only be more stable, access to credit, but they also see tipping behavior better because the people that are making more money do go out to eat. And having more disposable income is, I mean, it's a consumer economy. So if you put money in a worker's pocket, that worker is going to spend it. It doesn't go to a second house. It doesn't go to retirement plans. It goes to food. It goes to rent. It goes to the general well-being of a society. It's a way to capture the dollar.
And
Not to mention the fact that industry workers use up about $600,000 in just food stamps alone a month. That's just industry workers. And if we're being given wages that are more in line with what everybody else is getting, we're going to be taxed on those wages in addition to being taxed on our tips. So instead of on the first of the month taking money out in the form of subsidies and childcare and welfare and food stamps, we're going to be contributing to, as working taxpayers, even more money because we're going to be taxed on those wages in addition to the tips that we're making on top of it. And I always explain to people that, like, your worker at Dunkin' Donuts, do you tip at Dunkin' Donuts? You know, usually when it's 2 change, I give them the 3, right? You know,
Yeah,
I don't want the coins. You know,
Yeah.
That's a higher percentage than what we're getting as waitresses. You know, you're tipping 50% on a coffee,
Right.
and you're doing it thoughtlessly. And those people are making $9 an hour. And don't you get a different level of service when you sit down at a restaurant?
no doubt.
Then
You don't have to
why are
preach to
we-
me about that,
Oh, I
but
understand.
the other 50%
right,
you certainly
it's
No,
do.
they
why
do.
we're left behind
Yeah.
constantly.
Well, that's an issue, and there's a way that, besides access, decreasing how much social services have to be delivered is an issue, and that's always going to be an issue. But you never want to actually vilify that. It's part of it is how we value the people that do the work. Is that right now 70% of the people who serve are women, and there's a way that it's a disparate power structure, A, and then B, it's a way we value the people that are performing it. And we're saying that the people who serve are worth 30% of what somebody who works at Dunkin' Donuts is.
Well, there's a hearing tomorrow in House Finance on this bill. I don't know what the travel is going to be. It seems like they got a real itch to scratch to get the heck out of there for the session. So we'll find out. But I wouldn't mind in short order, depending on how long that lingers, for you to. I mean, obviously you can handle yourselves with the Restaurant Association, who argues this point, right? So maybe we'll have you back here to do it. Well, I'm not running on your tab, and I'm not tipping.
I appreciate that.
But if you are, I hope that you're going to bed tonight with a guilty conscience. My audience, I don't think so. Good luck with this. Appreciate the arguments.
Thank you
Mike,
very
nice to
much.
meet you. One more thing. Free putting, not good when we come back. Stay with us. Well, it was a tough day for me, too, because on the 15th hole, my cable went out. An outage in my hometown. My neighbors were actually watching the end of the U.S. Open on on somebody's smartphone on an app. On my glasses, I couldn't even see the putt. But here's Dustin Johnson. All he's got to do is 2-putt to go to overtime today. He couldn't get that done.
Well, I mean, I had it just inside right, and I don't know. Just I hit it. Thought I hit it pretty decent. Just missed left.
That's, boy, I feel for Dustin. It's the same feeling I had on 17. I just was able to have another hole to rebound.
Jordan Spieth, classy in victory, and Dustin Johnson, for the most part, classy in second place. You can't say defeat. The USGA tricked up that golf course. Here's what I suggest. You want links golf? Do it in Europe. Don't do it here. We'll see you on the radio tomorrow on WPRO News. Good night.